again. Hello, hello, hello. Welcome everybody to today's edition of Human Conversations. I am James S.O.U.L, the creative director of the International Institute of Humanology and one of its optimism coaches. And I have the utmost pleasure of being here with you today to discuss a very important topic. The topic of today is cultural appropriation versus cultural celebration. But before we get to that, let me introduce you to our wonderful panelists of today. Here today with us, we have Hulya Kurt. Hulya has spent 30 years at corporates where she has occupied many different roles, ranging from business admin manager to global customer experience lead, business strategy manager, and process design lead. She has been part of diversity and inclusion through global steering committees as corporates and has led local businesses with rescue groups and is currently the president of OWIT, an organization of women in international trade in Lake Geneva. She is connecting with us today all the way from Geneva, I believe. Perfect. Hi, Hulya. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you very much, James. Thank you.
My pleasure. The next person that's connecting with us today is Christa Uehlinger, who holds a doctorate in law, is an intercultural expert who has worked for over 10 years in international business as a manager and also as a consultant for global organizations and companies. She is connecting with us from Switzerland, I believe, as well.
Perfect. That's right, yes. Hello.
Hi, Christa.
Nice to be here. Thank you.
And then, least but not least, we have Javeria Asad, who is based in Saudi Arabia and is the founder of Social and Entrepreneurs Club for Expat Women and Kids named Elite Clubs KSA. She is a mechanical engineer and worked with an engineering consulting firm in Karachi for the 4 years as HVAC design engineer, and later contributed with engineering careers in local contracting companies in Saudi Arabia. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, James.
And finally, we have Jessica J. Lockhart, the founder and creator of Humanology and the International Institute of Humanology. She is a renowned speaker, international panelist, multi-selling author, and she's connecting with us here today from Panama. Thank you for being here with us today.
Thank you so much, James. It's a pleasure to be here with all these experts in human beings and in international situations. Let's see how we can deal with this very interesting topic today.
Wonderful. Thank you so much. Thank you everyone for being here today with us. Let us start. We have 3 questions for our panelists, and let me remind our public that at the end we will have about 30 minutes to answer all of your questions. So please, if you have anything you'd like for any of our panelists to answer, write it down in the comments below, or even if it's just a comment, please do so as well, and we'll try and get to all of them. Perfect. Let us start. The first question that we have here today is, what are, in your opinion, the main differences between appropriating another person's culture and celebrating it? Hulya, if you could be so kind.
Thank you very much for the very first question and the first opportunity to speak up. So I really appreciate it, and I'm really excited. Myself, being part of diversity, inclusion, and working in multinational companies, for me, respecting the other cultures are very important. It all starts with respecting and also appreciation, plus as well celebration. Celebration their cultural days, their very big feasts. For example, in the Muslim religion or culture, we have got now Ramadan, right? So now we have started our fasting month, and then we're going to have our celebration. It's very important that we recognize it, acknowledge it, and then at the same time as well show respect. Because during Ramadan, you're not allowed to eat or drink until sundown. And that means it's long days, even when you're working. So for a Western culture and someone working under a multinational company, but is fasting, it's very difficult to stay attuned. So there must be a kind of respect and also some kind of tolerance. And that's what I think is very important. Appropriation, when we come to that question, honestly, appropriation is an interesting thing, right? Some people would like to have or take an aspect of the culture because they like it very much. Although it's not theirs, they try to adopt it. Could be acceptable. Yeah, no, of course. But we need to be mindful and very careful of how we do this, right? We don't want to offend the other person. We don't want to offend the other culture. So examine really what you are doing and how you are adopting maybe the other culture. Because, think about it. Would I be offended if someone wore an important religious symbol from my culture without understanding what it truly means? I might be, very much. So we need to be very careful how we are placing this. Another thing which is important is listening. And listening is with 360 degrees. Not with what you have in your head. Put it aside and try to understand what the other person is saying. Because there are types of listening. Listen to their stories. Understand the implications behind the aspects of their culture that you're interested in. And use that understanding to broaden, of course, your perspective. So it's very important how we are doing this appropriation. Is it something to be done or not? Everyone is different and unique. They will decide for their own. But if you do so, you need to consider the context as well. What does the certain symbol or the certain particular aspect of that culture mean? When and where is it appropriate to use it? It all comes, appropriation. Is it appropriate? Understand what are the various aspects of this culture and why is it so important for them. So I think for me, like a personal view, appropriation, appreciation, yes, of the other culture. Appreciation, absolutely. And share my own culture. At the same time, celebrate the other culture. Because what I believe in is from union comes strength. From diversity, we are coming to different solutions, different aspects, different viewpoints, and we find solutions to any challenge or problem. Therefore, it's very important that we embrace each of the cultures and of the religions. Doesn't need to be appropriating at all. You can do that with your own appreciation, listening, and what you feel about it. But I think for a person itself, it's really also very important to celebrate their own culture, because everyone has got a culture. I've got a Turkish culture. Middle East, it's different. But we can work together. When we show this respect, when we show appreciation, when we celebrate all together, when we are tolerant, and obviously understanding and listening the other party without jumping into assumptions. Because this is the human behavior as well. We jump into assumptions. We predict something. Don't do this. Always try to understand. And there is always a positive intention behind any action that the other person does. And that's the beauty of these different cultures that we have. And therefore, on the planet, if we think about human beings, for me, the pledge would be, come on, let's live in peace. We have one world. We are all human beings. We can live together. We can share this world. We can make this a better place to live with appreciation, celebration, tolerance, respect, and anything that goes with it. That will be the answer to that wonderful question, James.
Thank you so much, Hulya. Thank you. Christa, please, the same question.
Same question. Thank you. Already a lot said, but I would like to step one step back and look at us as human beings, because what made me actually move into the field of cultural diversity is that I just am so inspired by the world and the beauty of all human beings. And I think that's not always respected. So what I would like to say is, everybody is a beautiful human being, but is brought up in a different way. And I think that's to be aware of. So if we want to use the beauty and live the beauty of this world between us humans, we need to recognize and accept, as Hulya said, that there are differences. Because if I'm brought up in Switzerland, I act and react in a different way than somebody from Italy, from Panama, from Turkey, from wherever. Or even within Switzerland, I act differently than somebody in the western part of Switzerland. So I think we need to learn again to work with those finer traits and to understand and accept the other as they are. Now, what I would like to bring in here, which I'm in intercultural work for a long time now, and I just love it. And I work with different people. Yes, I was in business, but I also work with military officers. I work with nurses. I work with kindergarten teacher. I work with police officers. They all face the same challenge, or they see it as a challenge. To me, it's not a challenge. To me, it's a chance. It's an opportunity. But what we need to understand first is how our cultural imprint gives us a comfort zone. So we have our cultural bubble, and that's the way we act and react, and that's normal and used. Now, once we interact across culture, whatever that is, religion, nations, gender, whatever, we are always confronted in this comfort zone. We are suddenly confronted with something which is foreign. So I think a fundamental question is to everyone watching now, ask yourself, how do you deal with something which is foreign to you? And there, to me, it starts, because if you're an open person, a curious person, and you see the beauty of the other person without saying, hey, that's not the way we do things here, so that's the defense of my own culture, then it starts to be fun. Then it can be creative, innovative, something can happen. But if you stay in your own bubble and think the world is only, it works like I'm used to it, you start to defend and so on. So the question, is it celebrating or is it appropriation? To me, it's not a vice versa, because the moment we are still in this either or, we compete each other. I think we need to learn to really see the other person, have the openness and willingness to see the beauty of the other person, wherever this person is coming from, and go from there. And this needs to recognize my own culture, to accept my own culture, to respect my own culture, my own being, because I have internalized my way of being. And so one step when I work with people, the first step always is I start to make them aware of their own culture again, their values and how they show in daily life. Because if it's aware, you can start to deal with it. Otherwise, you just move on like a software. And so then you are in the playground. Then you can start to see the differences. And in the differences, there are always commonalities. And then you can start to be open and create something. Or you can reject it, but then we have a problem, as we can see on this world. So to me, it's not either or, it's a combination. We need to learn to synthesize the beauty of each and every human being.
Thank you so much, Christa. I love it. The question, how do you react when there's something foreign to you? Public, write down on your comments your answer to that question. I would love to read it in the comments. Javeria, the same question, please.
And may I just add, and if the public writes down answer, please be as honest as possible, because you will realize your emotions. And I start to work with emotion of people more and more, because emotions are information. The moment you're frustrated or you're getting angry, it tells you so much about your own culture. So I'm curious to see the emotions.
Yes. Javeria, the same question, please.
Thank you so much, James. Actually, Christa and Hulya already said so many things about it. And I'm glad that I'm part of this conversation. This is a very rich topic. And being an expert in Saudi Arabia, I have experienced multicultural environment actually. And you will find many nationalities are around you with their cultures and languages. And in my opinion, what I observed here is culture appropriation more than celebration. To be honest, I'm not a big fan of this culture appropriation because, in my understanding, there's a drastic difference between a culture appropriation and culture celebration. Like to celebrate something means you are not liking, as Hulya said, that not liking that particular ritual of any other culture, but you're also very much convinced with the philosophy and the ideology of that particular tradition or ritual. And before celebration, you have studied and you can say perceived well about all the norms of that ritual more deeply. Like you can say, and you're adopting as it is. The term as it is, I will say, with its true essence. I mean, without any alterations. And also, you're giving the full credit and acknowledging the source of that ritual you got inspired. For example, when I visited Malaysia in 2018, I noticed that whenever we paid bills in shops, restaurants, or taxi drivers, they took it with some particular right-hand gesture like this. I observed many times that one day I asked one of shopkeeper, why are you doing this? So he said that this is our faith that when we receive money from our right hand like this, God add blessings in our business or work. I really got inspired with the idea, and I adopted it actually in my life and with the same belief. And I used to take money from if I'm doing any business or any dealings. This is called culture celebration, in my opinion. And like if you are picking certain ingredients from that certain cultural activity which suits you, and ignoring the other aspects because you don't find it too appropriate to adopt, then this is cultural appropriation. So, and this is unethical and unjustified with the people who celebrate it with their tradition respectfully and with heart. As I said, I'm observing many things here. So, like I saw many Arab girls wearing black necklace, which is used by Indian married women. They wear it after getting married, and they wear it with so much respect and warmth. They have religious, social, and emotional attachment to that necklace. And Arab girls were just as a fashion symbol, totally ignoring the philosophy and essence behind the necklace. So I saw some Indian women really, they got offended. So I believe if you're adopting things because just you like them without knowing the background, definitely not setting a good trend for your kids also, because we are parents also. And being a mother, if I'm doing something which I'm unable to convince with my physical justification to my kids, then in future, maybe my kids can adopt anything without knowing the reason behind it. So this is inappropriate and can damage many social and religious norms. So you can say culture disaster, you can say somehow, in my opinion. So we should respect each other, culture and tradition, being a civilized people, and give credits or recognize the origin of items that you borrow or promote from other cultures rather than claiming them to be your own original ideas. So this is my opinion about this culture appreciation versus culture celebration. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Javeria. I think we should have called this roundtable discussion cultural appropriation versus cultural celebration versus cultural destroying, like what you were telling us, because it's, wow. Thank you. Jessica, please, the same question. Wow.
Thank you so much, James, for the question. Well, because I am last, I am lucky enough to have a lot of background covered. So yes, I agree with you, Hulya. Respect is the #1 topic here. Respect to your own culture, respect to other cultures. Because when we talk about cultural appropriation versus cultural celebration, what I see is that there can only be cultural appropriation when there's a lack of respect. And I think there can only be cultural appropriation when common sense is non-existent. Let me explain this, and I will try and explain this using a couple of examples that I came across in my life that I think illustrate what I'm trying to say. If you remember the ad that we had for today's human conversation, there was this picture of this little girl dressed in a kimono. Well, a few years ago, there was this huge controversy because a little girl, a little Western girl, had asked her mom to organize a traditional Japanese tea ceremony for her birthday. And she had invited her little friends to that party, and they had all dressed in kimonos, and the mother had posted pictures on the social media and had received a ton full of criticism and attacks because they were accusing the girl of culturally appropriating the Japanese culture. And then there was a huge debate. It really became huge. It was immense. And there were people in favor, people against. Why do I bring up this case? Because, well, I have a lot of Japanese friends, and I've attended traditional Japanese tea ceremonies. I was asked to dress in a kimono, take pictures with them. And in that case, we were celebrating their culture. We were not appropriating anything. We didn't want to make that ours, like to take advantage of it. We were celebrating that very intense situation. I don't think anyone asked that little girl what her intention was. And that's the second point I wanted to make here. Intention matters here. What are we doing? What are we trying to obtain by doing what we're doing? The second example that I wanted to mention is something that was also mentioned by Christa when she was saying that, well, she's been an expert working in this field for many, many years. And what she says is we have this culture imprint. We all have it. We all come from somewhere. We in humanology call it the cultural belief system. We all have our own beliefs, personal beliefs, religious beliefs, but also cultural beliefs that are shared by our culture, our community. And many of those beliefs we never question because we just absorb them because everybody agrees on them, then they must be right. Sometimes when you move outside of that circle that Christa was talking about, you might find other situations that might lead you to questioning your belief. And here comes the second story. When I was newly married, my husband and I got our first place. We were so proud of it. We were so happy. We were then living in Spain. And I recall my father, who by the way was an American from the US, from the United States. I recall my father coming to visit us the first day. And as soon as he got to our house, the first thing he did was he removed his shoes before he entered our house on his socks. Well, in Spain, that's a no, 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 no. It is horrible manners. It is considered to be terrible that you expose your smelly, stinky feet to the household, you know? So I remember how outraged and how hurt my husband and I were, this is many, many years ago, by his lack of respect to our household. You know, we were like, oh, who does he think he is? Well, a few years later, we moved into Poland, and were we not surprised to see that everybody did the same thing upon entering people's houses, and they were requested to do that. And why were they? Because it was a sign of respect. By removing your shoes, you don't put the garbage from the street into the person's home. So we then realized that what was precious and important to us was completely different to others. There comes the respect again. I will tell you more anecdotes and more information in the next questions because I have a lot to say on this topic.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jessica. Thank you for that answer. Let's move on to the next question. The question that we have for our panelists is, with the arrival of the internet, the world suddenly became a smaller place in which everybody can see everything, not like before, when traveling was so much more limited. Does this contribute to cultural appropriation and/or celebration? And what impact do you think it will have long term? Christa, if you could be so kind.
Okay, thank you for this question. I just share my observation. So it's interesting to see that due to digitalization and everything, we see much more. We cooperate much more together. We even virtually, immediately we cooperate across cultures. My observation is, it's interesting, there's just kind of a movement like, oh, everything is so the same, getting the same. Might be that there are new cultures evolving, like a corporate global culture, something like that, so where you share some values across boundaries. People think they are so very global, but my observation is, if it comes down to cooperation again, what just Jessica said and I said before with the bubble, it just pops up. So my hypothesis is that no, we're not getting closer. In contrary, we even sometimes get more apart from each other. I can also see tendencies of people sticking to their own culture much more, defending their way of doing, which I think can be very, very dangerous. But I think, to me, it's also tied into the uncertainty of this world we live in right now, because everything is changing. And when things change, we tend to kind of reconnect to our secure place. So I can see both. So I think it's a fascinating question, but I would say I can see both again. Like I said before, I can see some celebration approaches, but I can also see defense. And I just heard a very racist statement of somebody defending his own culture. So it's tricky to say, but I believe we need to work on it, and we need to be aware that each and every human being is different again. Socialized in a different way, and just because we are so-called closer due to the virtual world doesn't necessarily mean that we actually are closer to each other. So I give you an example which is very interesting. I work at the university, and we use an assessment for measuring the intercultural sensitivity of our international management students, and now year by year the results decrease. So that means the results show that those young people who are so global, so-called, are actually not that much intercultural sensitive as they believe. And I think that's really something to be aware of. So just because you have international experience, or before COVID they traveled a lot and so on, that doesn't necessarily mean that you actually have the respect towards other cultures, and that you live this sensitivity and so on. So to me, I would say the world seems to be closer, but as human beings, I think there's a deep need that we reconnect with each other in the sense we discussed in question number 1. Acceptance, respect, and I would like to add one more point, because it's so, and I'm not confronting everyone, I fully agree, but it's so easy, even for me, to say, hey, be respectful, accept the other person as they is, and so on. If I work with people, the most difficult place to be in is really do it, because at that point, implementing it, applying it, everybody, I mean, if you read articles by well-known people or McKinsey, PricewaterhouseCoopers, and so everybody now talks about people skills and so on, lists and lists and lists, and now, okay, that's fine, but now implement it. And that's where, to me, that's where the work starts, because that ties in again, how do you deal with foreigners?
Thank you, Christa. Thank you for
You're welcome.
Javeria, the same question, please. Oh, the microphone.
Yeah.
Correct.
Yeah. Thank you, James. Okay. Like, if you like to explore cultures and traditions, then definitely traveling is the best way, of course. Like, to get first-hand culture, accurate information about traditions, and that's why many countries are, establishing their tourism industries, and somehow social media actually has definitely played a vital role to connect the world. But somehow, in my opinion, while reading a travel blog or watching a vlog, vlog, you can say people are, uploading different documentaries, travel documentaries, or you can put information of the blogger. It's like it's trying to transfer about a culture or a tradition might be influenced or manipulated, because he will take the info as per what he is trying to portray about the place. But the reality might be completely different. You will find social media personalities who might be exaggerating and exploiting or making someone's custom controversial to get attention or to increase the likes of their pages and somehow to increase the views of their videos. The depiction about the place or you can say custom in this case can be wrong, and reality can be ignored in a way because he's depicting his own perspective. For example, you can say many food bloggers, because during COVID, many food bloggers, originated like mushrooms. So they created recipes inspired by cuisines of other cultures without acknowledging the real work or significance, of the authentic dish, particularly. You can say when I can take my example. When I was coming to Saudi Arabia, I'm from Pakistan. I was giving some articles and YouTube written by some stereotypes, who believe that women are suppressed in our world. They are not allowed to work, or you can say unable to pursue their careers. But when I came here, the story was quite different. I saw many local Arab women working on high posts of different organizations. Yes, they have set some culture and religious boundaries, but these constraints or you can say limitations have their own philosophy and ideology, as I mentioned in my first answer. Like they want to maintain their individuality, and we should respect that. I dress myself in their traditional style by adopting it respectfully with the original ideology to celebrate, you can say. So I worked here publicly and I managed my own social entrepreneur club. Many Saudi owners appreciated my work as freelance HVAC design engineer. I worked here and I practiced my degree comfortably. So, and as you mentioned that traveling is limited and not everyone can afford to travel. And of course, after COVID, it's definitely more hard. Then we can connect with the people of that particular tradition, what we are interested to know. We can connect, for example, if you want to know about Malaysian history or Turkish history, I can call Hulya on a certain tradition to know exactly what is going to happen in this particular ritual if I'm going to adopt it. So relying on internet documentaries or articles created by authors or travelers, and somehow you will miss out some real shades and true spirit of culture, and it might promote culture appropriation as long-term impact, you can say. I'm not saying that all travel-based net material is not authentic, but we can evaluate or analysis what is real and what is fake. So before making any perspective or we can say opinion to adopt culture norms, study it well and try to find the original resources and then move forward towards culture celebration. Thank you, Sam.
Thank you, Javeria. Thank you for the answer. Please, Hulya, the same question.
Absolutely. So, lots been said because it's very, very enriching to hear from Christa, from Javeria, and also Jessica, and all these wonderful examples. Internet. Well, as much as I like internet, as much as it opens all the gateway to the world, it's also very dangerous. And we need to use the internet very skillfully, which is not happening with sometimes people, young generation especially, who are exposed to the content of the internet, which is not always, as Javeria said already, projecting the reality. And also comments like Christa mentioned, about really harsh and rude comments and being, how shall I say this, in quotation mark, racist, or in quotation mark, really not respecting the other person or the other culture, is also very dangerous. So hence the internet, be used cautiously, please. Specifically, if you hear something about a different country that you have no clue about, and there are many viewpoints, look out for unbiased, if you can, information. What we trust is maybe Wikipedia, we trust that. Or any person that you follow whom you know that this is unbiased. Because people have their own perspective, but that's not reflecting the correct cultural aspect of that country. If you really want to know about the country, traveling is the best thing, of course, because then you see it with your own eyes. But if you can't, then try to connect with other people. However, does the internet now, if you think about the initial question, does it contribute to appropriation or celebration? It depends on the person. If you are a person who is not really embedded in their, is lost, shall we say that, is lost, because young generations or people are getting lost. They don't know anymore who they are. They have lost their values. They don't know whom to believe anymore. They're something in the dark. It's much easier for them to be influenced by the internet and appropriate any culture or religious aspect. It's much, much easier. You can influence them like this. That was quick. But if you have a person who has been grown up in a family, circumstances as well, a bit more rigid maybe, have values, know their goal, have a vision, then appropriation will not happen, but celebration will take place. Because then we will honor the other culture. We will honor the other country, the other person, the humans. So it's a mixed between appropriation, depending on the person, the unique person who is really looking, watching, listening, hearing. There are many podcasts out there. There's many video YouTubes out there. And you wonder which one is true, which one is not. And hence you need to be selective. You need to be intentional, as Jessica said, really intentional about what you would like to know about that country. And what is your goal, actually, at the end of the day, to know more about Saudi Arabia, for example? What is your goal? What would you like to know about it? Then you can use the internet appropriately, but that does not lead to appropriation. That does lead to really tolerance, leads the curiosity of understanding what's happening on the other side. Again, people who are more closed, it's a different story. They would be maybe feel threatened, and hence these harsh comments on internet. And therefore myself, I'm really selective on what I'm following on internet with people, on Instagram, on YouTube. I don't follow anyone. It's just really intentionally what I would like to get out. What's my goal? What's my intention? What's my purpose? Because we do stuff with a purpose. Why do we follow this person? Because I want to know more about cooking, shall I say. And I know that Jessica, make this up, is great in baking cakes. So that's why I follow her, because I believe she's authentic, you know? So look and watch out. Anyone who's watching us now, listening to us, be careful, intentional, selective. Don't get influenced by all the comments. The reality might be completely different. And if you want to know more, dive into different connections, into different resources, rather than solely and only blindly follow only one person. So that would be my 5 cents to add to that question, James.
Thank you, Hulya. Thank you for the answer. Jessica, please, the same question.
Okay, so the first thing I'd like to say is, I want to take what Hulya said a little bit further. I agree with you, totally agree with you. I agree with everything everybody was saying, but I would compare what the internet brought us to the way in which a lot of people experience the countries they visit. Okay, the internet opened a TV window to us. We sit down in front of the screen and we can watch anything, anywhere in the world, and we can select the channels, sort of. And to me, that is like doing tourism in a country. You go to a country as a tourist. Well, most tourists never actually really experience the country. They go sightseeing, they try a little bit of the food, but they don't really live the country. They don't experience it. I'll tell you a quick anecdote again. When I was living in Russia, I remember going out for lunch with many of the expat women there, and we would go shopping and then we would go to eat. And we'd be in a huge mall with this food court. And we'd all each choose something to eat from the different restaurants. And I recall many of the ladies saying, oh no, I can't eat that. That's too Russian for me. And I would ask them, well, have you ever tried it? Oh no, but the smell, that's too Russian. They would insist. And I'd say, but you are in Russia. Aren't you going to try it? Ever try it? No, thank you. So they would not really even experience Russia, even though they were living in Russia. And I'm sure they went home and they were all like, I know Russia very well. They only visited the touristic places. They never mingled with a Russian person. They never tried to learn the language. They never ate the food. They never did anything but just be tourists in the country. So I think that the internet is a bit like that too. You can just be a tourist that's browsing, superficially browsing the rest of the cultures, but you have to really live those cultures. You have to get into them to really learn from them and celebrate them. I would also like to say that whenever we confront somebody who is defending a certain culture, you know, that is because they feel threatened. When somebody gets mad because you are using part of that culture, they're feeling threatened. They might be rightly threatened or wrongly threatened. They might be right in their fear. They might be wrong in the fear. But the root cause is always they're feeling threatened. So when people accuse others of cultural appropriation, they are defending their culture because they fear for their culture. And that is something that should be addressed. First, why am I feeling threatened? Is this really going to hurt what I'm doing? There's another example of huge cultural appropriation accusations against designers and artists who use, for example, old Mayan designs to create their own designs today. And they say, well, they're appropriating Mayan culture. Well, what is the limit there? They are using designs that were created hundreds or thousands of years ago to create their own designs today. What should be done in that case? Where is the limit? I think that the internet, somehow by opening that window, that TV, showed us things that we never had access to before. How many people visited the Mayan countries before? A very small percentage of the many thousand millions that can watch it on TV today. So by having more people see things, then it's harder to keep it under control. It's like religion that was mentioned both by Javeria and Hulya. Well, you know, there are symbols that people take because they like. For example, there's one that I really like very much, Fatima's hand. I'm sure you know Fatima's hand with the little eye there. Well, a lot of people just use it because they like it. They find it cute, they find it beautiful, but there's a lot of meaning behind. Well, you know what? In my own personal view, the fact that Fatima's hand is being disseminated and shown around the world might, yes, be cultural appropriation because most people don't even have a clue what it means. But by having that dissemination, you're increasing the possibility of having more people be curious and ask about what it actually is and what it actually means. So in a sense, they're paying a service to the real meaning of Fatima's hand by making it so popular. So I leave it there.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for the answer. We're going to move on to the next question because I want to have time for the public's questions. The next question we have is, in our more mixed world, preserving one's identity might seem harder, whereas interculturally seems to be very enriching. How can the two be combined? Please, Javeria, if you could be so kind.
Thank you, James. Okay, if we try to define culture, for example, firstly in a broad perspective, it includes national culture, societal culture that cover nations like Arab culture, there are so many cultures, regional cultures within nations like Bengali and Punjabi cultures in India, hybrid and intersecting cultures and indigenous culture like in Australia or North America. Fusion is always good, I must say. Fusion is always good, but if it's beyond culture appropriation, as we discussed earlier, you can adopt things from other cultures and get inspired from other cultures, but highlighting your own tradition is also very important. Maybe you heard a phrase, the camel desiring to have horns lost even his ears. Sometimes we are, taking replicas from other people and forgot our individuality. So, for instance, let's say I'm a salesperson and I'm going to meet a client who is from Japan, right? And in order to promote my business and to impress him in a very first encounter, I will definitely try to learn and about the culture, his favorite food, favorite sports, common traditions about Japan. And at one point, knowing someone else's culture can benefit my own interest. However, having said that, it will prefer to lose my individuality over the business deal. I will just I'm doing all this just to communicate with my client, right? So another example, like I'm part of public service or public speaking organization called Toastmaster International. Maybe you people know about it. Each country is having, I'm a Toastmaster, of course. Each country is having their clubs for English language and for regional languages as well. However, the medium of language is English for all annual contests and debates and everything. I'm a member of my native language Toastmaster Club also. And similarly, there are other clubs for Arabs in Arabic and for Indians in their regional languages. Participants from like all these clubs, when we meet each other, international contests, they compete in English. What I'm trying to say is that all these clubs are competing with each other in English, but at the same time, they know the importance of their own native and individual languages. They're preserving it, right? And they also, form their own native languages to preserve the essence, basically the true essence of their regional languages, which is of course close to their heart. So, and also you can take example of China. You will find products of China in each country, customized to the country's culture and nation needs. They study thoroughly about the needs of that every country. So don't you think China have not studied the culture of all nations and countries? Of course they did. But at the same time, they did not lose their individuality and dependency on others. China have their own WhatsApp messengers, their own mobile operating systems. Moreover, whenever the president of China speaks on international forum, he will not speak in English. He will speak in his own Chinese language to preserve their individuality. So this is actually, we should do that if we want to, keep ourselves upgraded at individual personalities. Like basically, I'm trying to say, trust of my whole conversation is that we can benefit from interculturality to improve our networking, business dealing, social norms, keeping your own individuality as our dignity. It's a mutual aspect that if we respect the values of other culture and tradition, then this coherent attitude will open the doors of acceptance of our culture by other people from various countries, of course. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Javeria. Thank you for the answer. Please, Hulya, same question.
Absolutely. So, Javeria, by the way, I'm also in Toastmasters in Geneva. So I'm the area director of D4. So Toastmasters is an absolute great public speaking international club, which is enriching and combining both, as Javeria explained. But this is very rare. I am the opinion, yes, we shall combine them. But do we need to combine them is another question. Or how to combine them, actually. Because what I know, a little anecdote, I am Turkish and I grew up in Germany, any other Turkish person, right? So we have invaded unofficially Germany, by the way. But that's aside, After a while, I went back to Berlin. We do a nice tour and we're in Kreuzberg. And Kreuzberg, for the people who know maybe a little bit of Germany, know that Kreuzberg is really majority Turkish population. There are a lot of Turkish people. And they all have their market, their butchers, etc. Everything is in Turkish there. So we were just passing by, and I saw on the shop window something, which I thought, we are looking for someone to work in the shop who knows German. So I was like, what? Are we not in Germany? Or maybe am I mistaken? Some cultures create such a silo within a country that they feel the outside to combine as a threat to their own values, to their own religion, their culture, their language, how they live. And that's why they're so preserving in their silo that they don't even have no outreach outside the silo. And they're afraid. They're afraid. They don't go out. That's it, done. They don't want to combine. They don't want to do anything. They're living in a foreign country, earning euros, but preserving Turkish. They don't integrate. They don't want to integrate. So there's the other side of the coin, where within a country, there are a lot of big silos whom they don't want to go out, who are afraid of this. And that's an interesting phenomenon, I think. Although we might think being open and curious, we should be enriching, and that's absolutely normal, we know for a fact that in each country we have got these silos. And they are also then outside not accepted. Then they're getting as well what they are like criticized, you know, and then they also feel not accepted from the Germans. But at the same time, it's interesting, they're not also accepted by the Turkish people. You know, in Turkey, because for them, they are the Germans, the German Turks. Can you imagine this as a huge dilemma? And then they lose their own identity. It's actually very sad. And therefore, they don't go to Turkey either. They stay in Germany, and that's it. This is how they feel safe. That's their safe environment. And this is how it's going to be. How to open this up? It's very, very difficult. Here we come to Christa's point. Adoption. How are you going to open this up? It's great to say respect and all that, but you know, the reality shows different. And to change a human being and a behavior, that requires a lot of determination, perseverance, stubbornness, shall I say a bit of brainwashing as well, because you need to repeat that everything is fine, you will be not harmed, everything is safe still, you can go out, you can be revealing yourself, get mixed, start to learn German. As you were saying, Jessica, before, you know, you live in Russia and you have no clue about a bit of Russian, okay? You don't need to be native. I mean, no one expects, but at least say thank you, you know? So this is a kind of interesting question, you know, shall we combine it or not? Yes, in an ideal situation, yes, but the reality shows it's not. Thank you.
Thank you, Hulya. Thank you for that answer. Please, Christa, the same question.
Okay. So I would like to provocatively ask back, do I need to preserve my own culture? Can I actually preserve my own culture? Will I lose my own culture? I don't believe so, because I would like to bring in a new aspect, and that's culture is dynamic. So your own culture is dynamic over time. If I look back at my age of 15, I had different values. I had a different culture than I have nowadays. When I was then starting to travel, because I'm a curious person, and I stayed longer in one place, then you unconsciously also adapt a bit to this place because you need to survive. Unless you're in a expat community and you're in this bubble, and then you don't eat what in Russian food, for instance. But I think that's a natural way. What I would like to say here, culture is dynamic. We change over time. We're not the same person, even if we think we're the same person all over. But that's a natural dynamic. So I often hear when I work with people, oh my God, I'm losing my culture. And that's again, this person who is afraid of something, because I believe strongly you cannot lose your culture. It's so deeply engraved in yourself, and you have your cultural identity. So I don't think you can lose it, but you can be threatened, or you can feel threatened because of foreignness around you. Again, back to my first answer. Now, I also think the beauty actually, so should we combine and so on? I think the beauty is, if you look at it, there are always polarities in life. So it's also culturally, it's my culture, that's your culture. There's a polarity, there's a dilemma, as Julia said. And I think within this, there is a creative potential, but that needs work. It needs to recognize it. and then you work with it. And that's what oftentimes doesn't happen. People are like, it's my culture, it's yours, and should I lose my culture, and that's yours, and I'm threatened of it, and so on and so forth. So that's a very human reaction. But if we, it's kind of the plus and minus, and we synthesize it, we create a synthesis out of it, then life grows. If we stick to in this dilemma, we compete, and nothing happens. So I think it's very situational, it's very contextual. It requires that we start to reconnect ourselves to us as a human being, and that also, my main method in this topic is you need to self-reflect. You need to self-reflect about your own culture. You need to self-reflect about the situations you're in culturally, what's going on, what's my part of it, what's the other part of it. And by that, something can happen, and we can combine it, or maybe we combine it in a certain situation. It might be that in a certain moment, I just adapt to your culture, and that's perfectly okay. Or sometimes I might even maybe impress my culture on yours in a certain moment. But I think we need to learn to play with it. So there's the whole rainbow. And I give you an example. I mean, I was in international business. I had some Hungarian sales representative visiting, and I had an assistant, and he was half Hungarian and half Swiss. And I suddenly had this, I would like to welcome them. So I told my assistant, please write a welcome speech in Hungarian. I'm going to talk in Hungarian. I haven't a clue about Hungarian. Still, nowadays, I don't know what I said. But I was just trusting my assistant. But it opened up doors, because they felt welcome and so on. That was a moment of 10 minutes of totally adapting to your culture. I didn't lose my culture. Nothing happened. What happened was there was a welcoming atmosphere. So I think what we need to learn as human beings is reconnecting to be human, is reconnecting, becoming aware of our own culture, and then start to play. That's a whole play field there. And if you're afraid and feel threatened again, how do you deal with foreignness? You know, it starts there. To me, it always starts with yourself.
Thank you, Christa. Thank you for that answer. Jessica, please.
Well, thank you so much. Hulya, you know those Turkish communities you were talking about? I usually call them self-made ghettos, and I've seen them all around the world. Little Italy in New York, Chinatown. I mean, those are like ghettos, but they're made by their own inhabitants. They keep isolated from the local culture to preserve their own culture, and the effect they have is they create a third culture, because, as you said, they're neither this nor that, and that poses a lot of problems for everyone, for the locals, for them, for their original country. I think that part of the problem we have with that is precisely that fear of integration, that fear of losing one's identity, that leads to actually destroying their real culture because it is not their own culture anymore. And as for what Christa said, I would even be stronger than you. I'd say that cultures need to evolve. Can you imagine what the world would have been like without Marco Polo? What the world would have been like without Christopher Columbus? What the world would have been like without any mixing, any learning from one another? You know, we all progress, we all evolve from learning and growing. Can you imagine if the Arabs hadn't lived in Spain for so many years? Spain wouldn't be what it is at all. The beautiful Arab culture that is underneath modern Spain is there, a force of nature. It enriches the Spanish culture. It did for many years. And it still does. So when I think about how to preserve one's identity versus or complementing, you know, the need to be more intercultural, I often think about music. We have all kinds of local musics. I'm thinking about flamenco, for example, or now here that I'm in Panama, all these Latin American styles. There's fusion music. If music is not international, what is? And everybody loves watching a good flamenco dance or listening to a good fado singer from Portugal. Does that make him destroy their own native culture? No. By expanding our horizons, by drinking into the fountain of other cultures, we actually evolve in our own culture. I think I am a real example of that. I was born in the US. I grew up in Spain. I've lived in 8 different countries so far. And just as a small anecdote to illustrate what I'm saying, I recall my Spanish husband once asking me in a strong way, because he was a bit upset, you know? So where are your roots? You are a rootless woman. You have no roots. Because in Spain, roots are really important. It's like, where were you born? Who's your family? Who are your ancestors? You know? And he was telling me, you have no roots. I said, no, of course I do. But my roots are not planted on the ground. My roots come with me wherever I go. And today, after having lived in so many different countries with me, my husband says the same thing. My roots come with me. He's Basque. He was born in the Basque country in Spain, in the north of Spain, and he is Basque. He will always be Basque. Just even his physiognomy is Basque looking, and he will never not be Basque. But today, he's Basque plus many other things that he incorporated and he learned in all the other destinations we lived in. So how can we preserve our own identity while being intercultural? Just by opening ourselves to learning and keeping the beautiful things that we have in our own culture and sharing them with others. That would be my answer. Thank you, James.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for that answer. That actually concludes this part of our roundtable discussion. But now comes the most exciting part, which is the public questions and comments. First of all, I would like to thank everyone that's participating and everyone that is giving us questions and comments and everything. I'm very thankful for everyone that's taking part in this activity. Please join us in every other one as well. We look forward to having you here and getting to know more topics just like this one. I see that we have already a few comments and a few questions, so let me read them for you. This space, this part where we're answering the questions from the public, any of our analysts are able to speak whenever they want and answer, so please just feel free to answer the question if you'd like. The first comment that we have is all the way from Mexico. They're saying, what an interesting topic. Even living in our own country, it is easy to disrespect other cultural traditions. What we can only do is to celebrate and enjoy. Yes. I see that we have a few other comments and questions. Let me have a look. Oh, here we go. So we have a question for our panelists. Multi-question question, actually. It says, do you eat out? Do you go to restaurants? Do you only eat your own culture's cuisine? Are you appropriating or celebrating then? Anybody who would like to answer, please just feel free to. Yeah, go for it.
Well, as I said, I go to all kinds of restaurants and I love eating out and I love trying all kinds of foods and I like eating what people eat. So, for example, I was in Malaysia also, Javeria, a few years ago. I was offering a conference there and I remember telling my driver, because the organization were kind enough to offer me a driver as I was traveling alone, I remember telling him, don't take me to fancy places. Don't take me to where foreigners go. Take me to the local places where people eat. And I also remember being in Beijing many years ago in a conference too, and going out with the other interpreter. I was a simultaneous interpreter back then, going to the local restaurants where nobody spoke English, not at all, not a word of English back then. And I remember telling the waiters, you know, pointing at other people's plates, dishes, or using photographs, or being in Kazakhstan when we adopted our child, and trying to communicate with the waiters and waitresses, because of course everything was in Cyrillic, which we couldn't read, and we spoke no Russian or Kazakh back then. And I remember being in the restaurant and saying, shashlik, the only word we learned, which was this shashlik, and then we would go, moo, moo, or bah. And that's how we communicated, or just pointing at food. So by doing that, we actually connected with the waiters and waitresses who laughed and it brought us things so we could try. And we experienced a little bit of the real food in that country. So I always encourage everybody, they say, no, but I get sick because I'm not used to the food here and it's not healthy and it's not clean and it's not, you know what, you get sick when you never try anything else. Because you don't develop your natural defenses against anything. So by protecting yourself so much, and this could be applied to culture as well, you're actually limiting yourself. And then you get sick because you're not ready for anything. So that's my answer.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for that answer. If anybody else would like to answer this question, please go ahead.
Yeah, it's me.
Oh, I see everyone wants to.
Yeah, suddenly.
Go for it.
Okay, so I take it. I just want to add to that, me as well. I love eating out, and wherever we go with my husband, we always eat out, but not in these fancy restaurants. We were in Thailand. That was about 2 years ago, and then you go with the tourists. We went with the guide and all that. Everything is organized, and they were so, in this group, they were so terrified to eat out and have Thai street food. They're saying, no, we're going to the Italian restaurant. We did it once, and the next night my husband said, you know what? We're in Thailand. What are we doing? Said, we don't join you. We do our own straw. So we went through, all the little streets, and then my husband said, let's do this wonderful people. Local people are sitting there. They don't get sick, excuse me. I was like, let's sit here. Okay. We sat down and we said, as you were saying, yes. And the Thai beer, please. And then, and the calamari, yeah. And we had no clue what we were eating. But it was so delicious and so cheap, by the way. So cheap, by the way. It's unbelievable. So for me as well, to taste the culture is essential. And you celebrate that culture if you are eating and connecting with local people. I hate to go to these fancy restaurants where it's always high posh and you get français à la carte, je ne sais pas quoi. It's absolutely fine. Okay, I love it, but that's in France. France is France. We're somewhere else. So what are you doing? So honestly, if you do that, you celebrate that culture. You celebrate it, and it's beautiful. It's enriching you as well. So be open and curious. Mind me, we are again to the other thing, the ghetto, the silo. People are going out with tourists, etc., with tourist guides on groups, and they are so afraid to do something else. It's just interesting to watch. I find it fascinating how they are so afraid of other cultures. The same happened in South Africa. South Africa, I lived there. I had a short-term assignment in Johannesburg. And they were all saying, it's dangerous. And our son was 8 years old. I was working all the time. My husband doesn't know any English. He was in the car, driving everywhere. Where he couldn't, he got the mobile and said, what does he say? And I did the translation. And they explored, without even me not knowing English, all South Africa. So, okay, you need to be mindful. You need to be as well a bit cautious, but at the same time, not too afraid of really tasting the culture out there. That's my additional, little thing.
Thank you, Hulya. Thank you. I see that everybody wants to answer the question. So if anybody else wants to just go ahead.
Okay. Actually, I'm a little reluctant to try new cuisine because I have small kids, and they have same fixed recipes or fixed McDonald's or KFC, and you're going somewhere. They're always looking yellow M, kind of. Where is McDonald's M? So sometimes we are, walking miles to find that M. And as I said, I'm located in Saudi Arabia, so we have, restaurants from every food. Turkish, you can say, Italian, Arab food. So somehow we used to say, okay, today we are going to have a Turkish cuisine. So we are going to try a Turkish cuisine, or today we are going to Italian food. Let's have some Italian pasta. And today we are making Russian salad. So my husband he's a food lover. He always tries to new cuisine. I'm a little reluctant, as I said earlier. But definitely, if you are trying new cuisine, new things, as Jessica said, that definitely, if you will not try new things, if you will not explore new things, then you cannot enjoy the life. I mean, same things, consistency, you having the same taste in your cuisine will make your life boring, I guess. So try new cuisines, although I don't do that, but definitely it's a good practice. So I can suggest at least people to try new cuisine and new taste, of course.
Thank you, Javeria. I believe Christa also wants to answer.
Shortly, because everything is said. So I love to explore, and I always try foods across. I remember when I was in China, because I was testing myself. I went to a restaurant in Shanghai, in a very local one, in one of these noodle soup restaurants, which I couldn't read the card and didn't understand what I ordered, but I wanted also to kind of slurp the noodles, because in Switzerland, in my culture, it's very disrespectful. So so I was like, I really was out of comfort zone, because I just wanted to try it. I always could hear my mom like, don't do that, don't slurp. So I went there in this restaurant. I sat there in middle of Chinese people, no foreigner at all, and I slurped my noodle soup. And first it was a bit challenging, because my upbringing was don't slurp. So that's a cultural challenge. But at the end, it was so much fun. I mean, nobody cared, because everybody slurped, because that's normal in their way. So that was actually an interesting experience. So I always challenge myself. And additionally, I also would like to say what I also enjoy is actually discovering the different food in my own country, because sometimes we forget about it. And so, for instance, there is this famous sausage bratwurst thing, whatever. There's a very special one in Zurich, a very famous place. And this bratwurst in Zurich, you eat together with mustard. And now you travel an hour away from Zurich to St. Gallen. Same sausage, but you don't eat it with mustard. So sometimes if I teach there and I start my teaching and they say, I've been to Zurich in Saturday, I was having a bratwurst with mustard, the whole classroom goes, no, you don't do that. So anyway, so we even within the country, but sometimes we forget about the beauty of our country, and also food wise and so on. So I just love to explore. Yeah.
Thank you, Christa. Thank you for the answer. I see that we have more questions from our public. So let's move on to the next question. Okay, the next question we have says, I recently married before the pandemic, relocated to Florida, US, where my husband was born and has lived since then. My husband is Jewish, and his father is an immigrant, like me, but from Israel. We had a family discussion where I expressed my desire to teach my children Spanish since babies, because it would be easier for them, and because all my family is in Ecuador and most of them don't speak English. However, my father-in-law said that if I want an Ecuadorian family, I should go to raise them there. My husband says I am sensitive about the topic. I'm not sure if this is a culture clash. I think Jessica wants to answer because she's unmuted herself.
What am I going to say, Gabriela? I have 2 children. I am fully bilingual, English and Spanish, and I shifted languages depending on the country we were in. When my children were studying in English, I would talk to them in Spanish. When they studied in Spanish, I spoke to them in English. Why? Because especially today, knowing more than one language is fundamental. And that could be a clear, logical, objective argument for your in-laws. You could explain that speaking both languages fluently will help your children immensely in the future. And it has nothing to do with being not mindful of their own culture. One of the objections people sometimes pose is, well, but I don't understand what you're telling them. What I used to answer to the people who criticized me for speaking to my children in a foreign language was, do you think I'm telling my children anything about you? Really? They're children. I don't need to hide anything I tell them from you. And anyway, don't you want them to be fully prepared and equipped for the future? So I would say, I would sit down again with your in-laws and I would speak about the advantage of speaking more than one language and the advantage of knowing more than one culture. They, as immigrants, should know it. You're saying that your husband was born in the US? You could ask him, does he speak Hebrew? Does he speak Yiddish? Does he know about his origins and his religion? And he wants to preserve it, right? Well, it's the same thing. So that's what I would say.
Thank you, Jessica. Does anybody else want to answer the question? Christa, go for it.
I just would like to add, I think that's really a cultural clash, but there are also two families, and I support Jessica because I think that's actually a gift you can give your children, and it's also a kind of a celebration of both families and both cultures and even more cultures which are involved here. So that's the beauty. And I mean, what greater gift can you give your children than showing them that, teaching them the different languages, accepting the cultures in your family, and celebrating them together.
Thank you, Christa. Anybody else would like to answer this question?
Yeah, I would just to add one point. I would say that teach your kids all the languages if they want to learn. I mean, don't restrict them, and let them. You know, they will decide. If, for example, my young elder son, he's 12 years old, Fez. You know, most of the time when he's talking in Urdu, which is our native language, to somebody, I used to ask him, "Why are you talking in Urdu? Why are you not speaking in English?" He said, "Because he or she understands Urdu. Then why should I speak in English?" You know, when he was talking to any Arab kids and he was speaking in Arab, I asked the same question, why are you not speaking English? He said, because he understands Arabic, I'm also comfortable speaking in Arab. So why should I speak in English all the time? So I think they can decide by themselves in which language they are comfortable, how they can communicate. I think they should, this is their right, because in our school, they are teaching Arabic also, they are teaching French, they are teaching English, they are teaching Arab, and my kids are learning it. So I think they can decide better than parents. Don't pressurize your kids, I think. Thank you.
Can I add something, James?
Of course.
Okay. I would add, Gabriela, that it's been scientifically proven that bilingual children or people who speak more than one language have better wiring in their brains. We have better mental connectivity. We are capable of being more focused, and we can do more things simultaneously because our brains are trained to do that from learning those different languages and shifting from one language to the other. So not only do they learn to communicate, not only do they learn to understand other cultures, and that opens their worldview a lot, but their brains are more developed than people who only manage one language.
I would just like to add something which just came to my mind, because I think children, as Javier just said, children learn playfully. They are curious, they open, they just kind of play with it, learn from it, and I think that's so beautiful. It's much more the grown-ups who kind of limit it. I was working with kindergarten teachers, and they all had a problem with children who were different, and and when I was observing the children, they had no problem at all. They were just playing, curious, open, and so on. So I would even say, don't limit your child. I mean, it's open, and just let them play and be curious and open and explore the world. We could learn from children, by the way.
Yes. Thank you so much, Christa. Thank you for that answer. Wow. I love the answers we're receiving today. They're all so very insightful. I myself am having a lot of food for thought. So thank you, all of you, for this wonderful roundtable discussion. I'm in awe. Thank you. I think that we have time for one more question. So let's try and go for it. Okay. What about third culture kids? Those who grow up living in different countries, could they be a good example of the goal to be reached by humanity? Anybody would like to go? I see Jessica's
Okay,
already.
I will take the floor first. Well, third culture kids, for those who don't know that, I think it refers to the people who, to the kids who live in many different places as their children. For example, the children of ambassadors and diplomats, the children of expats, those who live in different places. And then it is said that they don't actually have their own natural original culture, but a third culture in the sense that they're not pure in their original culture. I think this relates to what Hulya was saying before with those ghettos or those silos. They are neither nor. So would that be, the question says something like, would that be the model for the future? Well, I think those kids have a very rich culture. They inherit their original culture from their families. If the family is mixed, they inherit part of the culture from their dad and part of the culture from their mom. That happened to me. My father was American, my mother Spanish. So I inherited a lot of American things and a lot of Spanish things. But they also learn a lot from the local culture where they're living in at different times in their lives, if they're exposed to it, okay? Because oftentimes those children live in a bubble. And not the bubble that Christa was mentioning before, but another type of bubble. They live in the international circuit, which is made up of international schools, where they only mix with international kids and international families in the international circuit, and they're not exposed to the local culture at all. So in that sense, they're really growing up with their cultures at home and the international culture at school, and that's it. So I would say that the model fails there because those kids are not really being immersed in each of the native cultures where they live in. Most of those kids barely go out with local children. And for example, my children, my own children, we lived in many different countries. My daughter could be the best example of that. She was born in Kazakhstan. When we adopted her, she came to live with us in Poland, where she attended first a local nursery because Russian and Polish were so similar that she could understand, and she felt a little lost because we didn't speak any of the languages she spoke, and she didn't speak any of the languages we spoke at home. So she went to the local school to be able to communicate a little bit, but then she started in this international circuit, and she started learning English because that was the language of the school. And then she stopped mingling with the Polish culture. From there, we went to Spain. Because we were using Spanish at home, she went to the local Spanish school and she learned a lot from the local Spanish culture. But then we were sent to Russia. Russia, international, she learned nothing about Russia. She was in the international circuit. We were then sent to Switzerland, where at the beginning, and this is funny, at the beginning she was in the international circuit, nothing to do with Switzerland. But then we were told we would stay in Switzerland, and we decided it's time for her to really get to know the Swiss system. And we shifted her to a Swiss school. And there she started mingling with other Swiss children and created her connections and learned about the culture. That is the real example. That is the real way, not the third culture in the international circuit, I would say.
Thank you, Jessica. Thank you for the answer. I believe we're running out of time. I am so sorry, ladies. I need this little space of time so that we can announce our next roundtable discussion. But before I do that, I would like to say thank you to all of our wonderful panelists for being here today, for having participated in this table discussion. It's been a pleasure having you. It's been very insightful, and I hope that our public enjoyed it just as much as I did.
Thank you. I loved it a lot. It was great.
Oh, that's wonderful.
Thank you so much, James.
Thank you.
Wonderful meeting amazing ladies here, actually. Jessica, Christa, Hulya. Learn a lot of things from you guys. Thank you.
Thank you. So let me announce the next roundtable discussion that we're going to be having on the 8th of May. And the topic will be Woman, Foreigner, Entrepreneur. Sounds exciting, right? Please connect with us on the same time, on the same place, just like you did today, and learn more about many, many different topics that makes us oh so human in this edition of Human Conversations. Thank you for being here today. I'm James S.O.U.L, and well, this is goodbye. Have a nice day.